we'll get started here. It'd be awesome to hear from all of you that are joining us and where you're from. What brokerage, and if you're an agent or a broker, if you wouldn't mind just sharing that into the chat, that would be super helpful. And then we can kind of cater the conversation accordingly, whatever you're comfortable with. So, I guess to start, one-to-one, again, thank everybody for joining us. And also, Brian, thank you. Really appreciate you carving out some time here. And I guess before we get into the conversation, Brian, it would be good to maybe introduce yourself a little and tell everybody maybe a little bit about 1,000 Watts, a little bit about your background, and then we can kind of go from there. And by the way, I'm Mike Feller, Chief Revenue Officer from ActivePipe. But thank you again, Brian.
Hey, thank you, Mike. And I'm happy to be with all of you. I see some names in there that I recognize, so nice to see some of you. I'm introduce myself. I'm Brian Boero. I'm the CEO of 1,000 Watt. 1,000 Watt is a creative and marketing agency that's focused on real estate exclusively. We've been around for a dozen years. We work with brokerages of all sizes. We work with teams. We work with prop tech companies, mortgage companies, title companies. We worked with builders, but all real estate. And my background has been in real estate media and marketing going back to 1997. I started out working for Brad Inman at Inman News. I was president of Inman until 2005. And what I really enjoyed in that experience was the marketing aspect of it. I've always considered myself a marketer first. So that's why I am running a marketing and creative agency. I love this industry, and I'm doing what I love to do. So that's me.
That's awesome. No, I appreciate that, Brian. And I've been very fortunate to get to know Brian a little bit over the last year or so, and we've recently partnered with 1,000 Watt and got to know the team, and really, really good at what they do, but also just really good people. And I think that hopefully I'm excited to have this conversation and to kind of chat about a few things here. And I think today, what we're, as you all saw in the title, we're talking about strategies, in a changing market. And I think specifically, really kind of want to dig into the recruiting side, because that's, obviously one that's close to us, Brian. That's one of the things that we've been kind of coming in together on that. So I'd love to hear, to kind of get us started here, Brian, just to, based on some of the things you're seeing certainly in the market now, from a recruiting point of view, what do you see are some of the things that people need to really pay attention to, or really critical elements to an effective recruiting strategy, so to speak?
Well, I'll say at the outset, I'm sure a lot of you sense this in your market, but I've heard this over and over from broker owners that I know and that we work with, and that is that as hard and traumatic as this situation is, it's an extraordinary competitive moment. Companies that have the financial or intellectual wherewithal to make moves and do interesting things and think strategically are looking at a really interesting opportunity to gain competitive advantage. And that, of course, extends to recruiting. So there are lots of companies right now who are retrenching. They're really, really struggling. And to be honest, they may not come out of this. Those companies that are strong, have ballast, are going to come out of this, maybe a little bit beat up, but are going to come out of it, have an opportunity to connect with agents who are right now, in many cases, thinking long and hard about their futures. Sales are down anywhere from, half to more. Agents have rarely had this much time on their hands, and you have rarely had uh, a moment in time where they are, I think, more receptive to your message, to what you have to say. You have their attention right now if you can speak to them where they are. So I think it's a really amazing competitive moment right now and a good time to be recruiting. In terms of how to think about that and where the opportunity lies, one of the things that we've been working on with some companies, and we work with companies all over the place, is really kind of unpacking in this moment what recruiting has been historically. It's a great time to question your assumptions. It's a great time to sort of unpack everything and look critically and kind of brutally at what was actually working, what you did just because you had always done it that way. Um, Look at the things that may have been on autopilot and reel them back in and reassess them. It's a great time to be doing that. One of the reasons that we started collaborating with you folks at Active Pipe, Mike, was because in the last year, we kept running into situations where we do some work with a brokerage company, and whether that's branding or sort of a marketing or advertising campaign, whatever, and they'd say, okay, now how do we adapt this to recruiting? Because recruiting is the lifeblood of many, if not most, brokerages. And
Sure.
what we kept running into were, okay, our managers are awesome, but the systems that we use to get those managers at bats, our meetings, are in many cases really tired.
Yep.
So it's the same drip recruiting email campaign we've been running on autopilot. It's the same personality career assessment. Our careers page or recruiting page itself hasn't been updated in years.
Sure.
We need to get better at our messaging around recruiting. So that was sort of top of mind for us going into this thing. I think it's become even more important while we're in the middle of it.
Absolutely. No, I love the way you're thinking about that. And I think that, we certainly, and we've talked a lot about, right now, when you look at the initial dip that has occurred in the market, the bottoming out and then the recovery, I think you're starting to see a lot of these markets, around the country that are starting to come out on the recovery side of things. But that recovery is not going to be an equal one. There are going to be people that are clearly going to win out of this and people that are not going to win out of this. So I think you're spot on there. Now, what I'd love to dig into a little bit, some of the things that you mentioned there, I thought were really interesting around content and messaging. And certainly with you guys being what I consider really the experts in this space around that, around crafting that narrative, the content and all of that. I'd love to get a little more specific on that, Ryan. So when you think about content, content that converts, content that really speaks to the core of what we're trying to accomplish here, how would a broker or an agent even think about, how would they even know where to even start tackling something like that? What would some of your recommendations be there?
Well, it always starts in my mind with differentiation, figuring out what is different about you. The essence of marketing and messaging, in my mind, and I've said this 100,000 times over the last 10 years, and maybe some of you have heard it, is, I always approach it as marketing and messaging and differentiation is really, it is doing what your competitors are unable to do, or saying what they are unwilling or unable to say. And that applies to recruiting as well. We look at lots of brokerage companies, and the recruiting message all kind of blends together. So, if you're EXP, you're talking about freedom and stock compensation. If you're Keller Williams, you're talking about your training and a commission cap and your downline. If you're Sotheby's, you're talking about your 300-year-old. Like it never really goes a lot deeper than that. Mm-hmm. And then everybody else is kind of in this middle ground of, well, we have technology, we have training, we have a culture. And that's all good, true stuff in many cases, but it all starts to look the same. Every brokerage is kind of saying the same thing until that point where the recruit prospect is sitting down to coffee with you or one of your managers and having that conversation where they can get really into the truth of what your company can offer them. So the problem really is kind of up here in the funnel. It's what happens before you have the opportunity to sit down and talk with a recruit and walk them through why your company is special. Because
Sure.
at the surface, it all kind of blends together. So it's got to start with looking really critically at your company and your value proposition from a recruiting standpoint and really getting deep into what is it that I bring to the table that no other company in town can. What is my point of view on the practice of real estate that is totally distinctive from any other company in my marketplace? Once you answer those questions, then you have to figure out how to express that difference, how to express that point of view. And then you go right into your marketing campaign. Maybe that is an email campaign. Maybe that's a social campaign. Whatever that is, you got to start with those questions. And it's interesting to watch that happen. A lot of great companies have inherent value. They have the things that make them good, but what has happened over the years being in it is they've forgotten how to put that out into the world in a way that is compelling or different or draws people to them. So it's kind of we always say we help companies fall in love with themselves all over again. So it's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
It starts with soul searching.
Sure. No, I love that. How much is it that you see, around storytelling as it relates to telling that story and that content, especially as it relates to recruiting? Do you see that being an important element of this, or I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's a rational and emotional thing. You need to do both in recruiting. And I hate to harp on this, and it worked 15 years ago, but we see these same drip systems in recruiting over and over again. And you send out the email, somebody signs up on your list or they go to a landing page, and then for a period of weeks or months, they get the email about training, they get the email about tech, and it's all kind of canned stuff with stock photos. And at one opportunity to break out of that pattern is, as you suggest, Mike, to tell a story. So I'm sure in your company, there is an agent that you brought over, you recruited away from another company, or that started his or her career at your company, and you or one of your managers took that person and helped them achieve success, significant success, right? I was over here at this brokerage. I came here and doubled my production, or whatever the narrative. Tell that story at a human level. Have them tell that story, right? Marketing and advertising is really creating something in which people can see themselves. So if I'm an agent right now wondering about my future, and you send me an email telling a story about how somebody found their future at your company, I'm going to see myself in that. So none of this is rocket science. It's just sort of being in the mindset of maybe stepping back from what you had done in the past.
Totally. I mean, I think what resonates really with me there is that a lot of what you're talking about, these aren't necessarily novel or new things, right? I think, but at the end of the day, it all goes back to how you do this, how you execute this, how you position the messaging, and how you approach it to bring that story to life makes all the difference in the world. And that's the key component.
It is. And just to sort of further this point, we run into a situation a lot where we'll go into a company and we'll talk with the broker owner, the CEO, executive team, and they'll say, geez, our managers are really struggling with recruiting because something has changed in the market. And frequently we tend to work with independent companies, though not always. Like, for example, we hear a lot, well, Keller Williams is growing in our market and our managers are losing people, or Compass has entered our market and has just created this chaos, and managers are back on their heels.
Mm-hmm.
They've lost their confidence. They literally have almost lost the words to articulate what they bring to the table. And so after we talk with the executive team, we'll go out, we'll talk to some managers, and we'll talk them through what they do.
Hmm.
And, 9 times out of 10, we find those managers are really strong, and the company actually has a really strong value proposition, because we tend to work with strong companies.
Sure.
They've just lost the confidence and the voice and the words to articulate it because something in the marketplace changed. Now, something in the marketplace is changing right now in a very jarring way. So it's a good opportunity to, again, sort of revisit, re-examine, reflect.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to go down kind of shift this into additional ways to kind of execute against this in the content. I guess before I do that, I know some of you may have joined late. If you don't mind sharing just who you are, where you're from, whether you're an agent or broker, we're actually gonna follow up an email, because we have an offer and some of the things that we're doing to help people during this time that we'll let you know what that is. So if you don't mind sharing, feel free. That'd be awesome. And appreciate that. But I guess to come back to this here, Brian. So now that, I think there needs to be a real focus on the content set of things. But once we get that, once we kind of narrow in on what is the messaging, you alluded to it earlier around some of the challenges when it comes to actually executing against this. What are some of the things that you see around, whether that's around a specific cadence or whether that's around, a certain tools? Like, what are you seeing as far as where the gaps are, or potentially some of the ways to kind of think about this from a best practice perspective, to say, okay, now that we've worked through the content side of things, what do I do from here? What are those maybe 1 or 2 or 3 things that you see from your side?
Mm-hmm. I think we're sort of tactically confused, and by that I mean we sort of tactically execute recruiting in lots of ways. I mean, obviously there's the interpersonal stuff. You or your managers are on the phone, you're emailing, you're going to coffee, all that stuff. But all the stuff that comes before that, the marketing part of recruiting
Sure.
has been a bit of a jumble. We see the same things over and over, the social stuff. We see a lot of testimonial videos where agents talk about the company. It's often a lot of agents in one video, and they just kind of go here and here and here. It's never sort of fully fleshed into a story about a person and their trajectory at a company in real human terms. So it's all over the place. And let me put it this way. We are strong believers in the power of good writing. Mm-hmm. And it seems like a lot of real estate marketing forgets the writing. And writing, by the way, it could be a video script. It could be an email. It could be an ad. But we forget about the content or the writing and jump right to the medium. So 10, 12 years ago, all of us in the industry were told, you got to get on social media or you're dead in the water, you're irrelevant, right? Then we had to do video. If you're not doing video, you're dead in the water or you're irrelevant. I've seen a proliferation of articles, blogs, seminars telling agents they need to get on TikTok. It's always something new you got to jump into. And so what we do is we jump into the medium without ever thinking strategically about the message.
Totally.
So we always think, pick one, right? And focus on the message first. All right. It's one of the reasons why, and really, this is how this came to be. We doing what we do, we help companies with their messaging. We're not a tech company. We partnered with Mike's company, Active Pipe, because they have a great email application for real estate. And we work on the message. Active Pipe is the medium. So you develop a killer, differentiated, compelling, human, emotional, rational story, and you deliver it in a smart way, right? So that's, in our mind, how to do it. You focus on the words, the thought, then you move to the medium, not just going after the medium because, we're all trying to keep up with everybody else.
Yeah, and I think the use, you mentioned the word smart a second ago, and I don't know if it was fully the way you necessarily intended, Brian. But I hear you loud and clear. I think for us, way we think about this is that there has to be a very smart connection between your digital strategy when it comes to recruiting and what I would consider your in-person efforts. Whether in-person meetings or calls that you set up, and you got to be able to bridge the digital world with that in-person world. And what we found in the digital world is when we talk about smart and the way we think about it is we think about how do we monitor, a client, a consumer, or an agent, or whoever your end the end user is, what their behavior is, right? And based on their actual behavior, how can we take them down a very unique journey that's based on the way they're interacting with content? And so that's where we can that's where I, always been really excited about what we've been doing with you guys, because when you all are creating that content and taking down people, down a specific journey and telling that story, that we can actually take that even further and see how people are interacting and how they're not interacting and take them down different pathways from there. And so I think that for us, that is really hard to do. I think that's really challenging to do, but the folks that are actually using data to supplement, a lot of the content, the messaging, the story, to me, those are the people that are going to be very successful coming out of this. The old way of doing things in a very manual way, in a way that is not being driven by data, I just feel like those folks, I think, are going to be falling behind.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You mentioned the sort of confluence of digital, and sort of the interpersonal dimension to this, and those things. Sometimes there's a disconnect. So all that sort of external marketing is really to create that at-bat, that moment for you to sit down and then have the interpersonal connection with the person you're trying to recruit. But sometimes even when that happens, to go back to, what I was saying about managers who have kind of lost their voice or lost their confidence, sometimes, ideally, when you sort of strategically tear down and rebuild sort of your recruiting proposition and reconsider it and sharpen it and question it, it should work in both places. So you should be delivering a compelling story outwardly, and that story should then be reinforced confidently when you or your manager are sitting across the table from the recruit. So those things, they do need to flow together.
Absolutely.
Typically in drip email, and this is sort of the allure of it, right? The promise of automated marketing is that you put it out there and, you can forget about it, when in reality, you shouldn't. You need to your point, in order to be smart about it, you need to be scrutinizing it ceaselessly.
Sure.
So yeah, that the digital and the personal have to flow together.
No, totally. And yeah, absolutely. But I think if you could find ways where you can use data to power the automation, is where you can actually do what you're talking about on a very personal level. You can do that really at scale and everything. So no, I think that's fantastic. So in the interest of time here, Brian, I'd love to kind of shift this now that we're kind of looking at, we started it a little bit around the environment. I'd like to kind of come back to that a little bit, just to leave some folks with some thoughts around, okay, now that we're kind of coming out of this, we're starting, at least in some markets, that we're starting to see some element of a recovery, at least even for folks that are not quite at that point, or maybe still at the bottom out phase. At least we kind of have some visibility as to what to expect going forward. Still, there's plenty of uncertainty. I understand that, but I'd love to hear about, what do you see? What do you kind of predict going forward as we come out of this as something that's going to be really key for people to focus in on and be laser focused in on as it relates to whether it's content or recruiting or, frankly, anything else on your mind?
You got to be better. I mean, that's honestly, this is forcing everybody to be better. It has forced us at my company to look inwardly at our processes and how we did things and to sharpen our tools. And yeah, I mean, if you're going to need to be smarter, be sharper, more strategic about recruiting, we're all going to need to be sharper at what we do in order to compete.
Totally.
I guess the good news and bad news is that there are going to be plenty of companies, like I said at the outset, that are simply going to be flummoxed by this and will not have the strategic capacity, the financial capacity to make any moves. But those of us that can look inward, sharpen our tools, and be really thoughtful about making some moves, I think are going to realize outsized benefits for having done that.
Totally.
I wouldn't hazard to predict what's going to happen on the other side of this thing, other than I think good companies will survive, and some companies that weren't so strong going in are just not going to come out. And as terrible as that is, that's an opportunity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So before I'm going to open it up to questions in a second here for everybody. So if you do have questions in a minute, feel free to type them in the chat. I guess, Brian, I want to give you the opportunity though. Is there anything else you wanted to leave the audience with as something to think about or anything that's on your mind there?
Yeah, maybe I'll just give you an exercise that we frequently walk people through. One of many that may help you start thinking about this stuff. So let's say you want to take this moment to maybe make some different moves recruiting wise, say something different. We have an exercise we call first best only. What is the thing your company was first to do? What is the thing your company is the indisputable best at? And what is the thing your company does that no other company does? Answer those questions from the point of view of recruiting, and you will begin to sort of put together the threads of a stronger recruiting story.
Love that, Brian. I love that, and I can't think of a better way to kind of wrap that. So I think that's fantastic. So I guess would love to in the remaining couple minutes here, everybody. Feel free if there are any questions. We'll spend some time either for Brian or myself. And if you don't mind, just type them into the chat there, and we'll field questions for a few minutes.
First best only. Please repeat that. Okay. What is the thing that your company was the first to do? Where did you lead? Where did you blaze the trail? What is the thing that your company is the best at? And think about things that you can prove. Empty claims tend to backfire. What is the thing that you can prove you're the best at, or claim with confidence that you're the best at? And then lastly, what is the thing that you do at your company that only you do that may be attractive to a recruit? First best only. Just write out the answers. The act of doing that will start you on that path to coming up with a stronger recruiting message and campaign.
I love that question. So I love the fact that we got to spend a little bit more time with that, because I think that's extremely valuable.
Any other questions? I've talked a lot on this webinar. I feel like I've
You're making my job easy. This is great.
Yeah, I know. I apologize.
No. All good. Are there any other questions from the audience? I think they're making it easy on us here.
They're making it easy on us.
Yeah.
Mike, thank you for having me on, and thanks to everybody who showed up. We do have this program with you. I'm sure you've communicated that to folks. We're the message. Active Pipe is the medium for getting that message out to the world, in this case, to your recruits. So I wish everybody the best in making that happen. I do see a question here. I missed the first few minutes. I jumped on your website. Your company is primarily a marketing company. Yes, we are a marketing company. We're a creative company. And that's what we do. Look at this.
No, now we're getting
Now questions. Okay. I am finding in New Jersey, agents are very sensitive to recruiting calls. I'm curious what you mean by sensitive. Does it mean receptive, or they don't want to hear it right now? What motivates an agent to consider leaving their brokerage? Boy, that's a big question. I think it's either emotional or rational. They're not feeling supported. Maybe they're feeling alone. Maybe the culture of their office has become toxic. There's emotional reasons. Then there are the rational reasons. Obviously, money, or your split, technology, training, all of that stuff. It's one of those triggers. I guess what you need to do is you need to figure out who is your ideal target. Who are you having the most success with historically, and who do you really want at your company? And then build a profile of that person and map out, again, really write down their motivations. In marketing, we call these things personas, and they seem a little bit silly because you'll literally say, okay, well, my customer is Linda, and here's where Linda lives, and here's what Linda does, and here's what motivates Linda financially and emotionally, and write that out. And you can start to answer that question for yourself. What does my ideal recruit want? What motivates them? Not receptive, and in some cases offended. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I might chime in for that one for a second here. I think at the end of the day, like, one of the things we've seen, certainly from a marketing point of view, is that when the virus started accelerating, there's a lot of talk around leading with empathy, and obviously your strategy 3 weeks prior may not have been your strategy that carried forward. Now, I think there's a lot of truth in it. And I think that's one of the things that we have, and what I'm thinking I'm really proud of, and I know, Brian, you guys live by this, is that, with Active Pipe, we truly were trying to lead from a position of helping people through this time. And that's something, and I think if you do that, the business outcomes follow. But at the same time, if you have a service or a provider or an offering that can help people, you shouldn't hide behind that. If you are a brokerage right now that can truly help agents or truly help your clients throughout this time, I don't think you should hide behind marketing and selling at this point, because at the end of the day, you truly can help. I think that when people get offended, and some of the things that we've seen is that I think that and I'm not saying this is what's happening here, but we've seen a lot of tone deaf stuff that's out there. But again, it's come from a position of helping people. And I see that actually in one of the comments here. And I think if you do that in an authentic and genuine way, and that permeates through all of your efforts, whether that's recruiting or marketing, I think people will understand that, and people will be appreciative of that. That's it. That's at least our view.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And, the gentleman from New Jersey, you are kind of in the thick of it. And so the appropriateness of different tactics or stances will vary, obviously, from market to market. And I'll say this. I've said to a number of our clients who have struggled with what to do. Do I recruit? Yes. Do I recruit? No. The answer varies right now, right? But what I have said basically is that anything you do publicly to show leadership is in fact recruiting. Mm-hmm. Brokerage leaders who are out there sharing a point of view, showing leadership, that's recruiting. You may not call it recruiting, But agents are paying attention, and they're looking at what companies are stepping up and helping, which companies are not, which companies are leading, which companies are just frozen and stuck.
Totally.
And yeah, you may not find it appropriate in New Jersey to go big on, a dedicated recruiting campaign right now, but anything you do publicly to lead is in a way recruiting, because agents are paying attention.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that's one of the things too. I mean, I think you see a comment there that agents are looking for leadership now, and 100% agree. And one of the things that I mentioned this earlier on the call, that one of the things that we've tried to do, at least with our part, is we offered what we call a product, Active Pipe for Leaders, which is essentially a retention account. And we're offering that for free right now. We're offering that for free at least through the end of the month, and potentially further. And that's something that for everybody here, just so you're aware, we'll send out a link through via email for all of you there. But that's something, again, we're trying to do our piece with this. And because I 100% agree that people they're thirsting for leadership and guidance. And if we can help facilitate that, then absolutely.
Yeah.
So listen, I know we're a few minutes over, but again, Brian, first of all, always great catching up, and appreciate you hanging out and sharing some thoughts here. And for those of you that joined us, thank you for taking the time today, and hopefully this was useful, and we look forward to talking to more of you in the future.
Yeah. Thank you. Be well, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Alrighty.